Hey everybody, Tony D with another lamp video. This one's about education. I've been sounding the alarm for a while now that the educational system is bollocks in the United States. The public education system, mostly run by very left-leaning women who, and again, I've talked about this concept before. It's not all women. It's not... I'm not saying they're a monolith, but I'm saying what's happening is the dark side of women's nature is kind of coming out. They are exerting their political influence for the first time, and they don't understand the limits. See, prior to this era, there was always a limit on just about everything, but because conservatives ran the show, and conservatives would eventually say, no, too much. Now, one could argue that they did that too much and stifled people to an extent. And that was true. If someone was different or had different ideas, the conservatives had their excesses. They would push conformity on you. But now we've gone too far the other way. And rather than push any conformity, non-conformity is paramount, as well as this idea of constant nurturing. And left-wing politics is very appealing to most of these kinds of women because it purports to be nurturing. Oh, don't worry, the state will take care of you. Don't worry, you'll get an income and a job and an education. All this is free. We're going to take care of you. We're going to give you health care. It's all going to be good. Well, the feeling behind that is a good feeling, and you feel good by doing it. But in actual practice, it's impractical and very damaging, because what you have now is you have these kids who have been so coddled they don't understand what responsibility is. And I'll give you an example that just literally just happened to me at the store. I'm coming out of the store, and I noticed this on Sundays when I sometimes go to the supermarket. A lot of people go and they're wearing their slippers, which really is it's too much. Like, I get it. I mean, it was bad enough people started wearing pajama bottoms to the store out in public, but now they're wearing their actual pajama bottoms and slippers. So ahead of me, as I'm heading out with my groceries, is a young mother and her son. And the son is, I don't know, he's a little kid, maybe he's like 8, and he's rambunctious, and he's, walking out with his mom, and his mom is in her slippers. And I just thought, do we really have to see your stinky ass feet in the supermarket while I'm trying to shop? Like, this is ridiculous. I mean, it was pretty warm outside, don't get me wrong, but I'm like, really? Slippers? I mean, this is what we're down to? Anyhow, she's wearing the slippers, and she starts chastising her son about the shoes he's wearing. And I couldn't hear the whole conversation, so I'm not exactly sure why, but I just thought, how can you chastise him? You're wearing slippers. He was at least wearing sneakers. So we get to the end of the how you come out of the supermarket, it's got the automatic door and it's like a railing. Well, the kid stops right there to tie his shoes or adjust his shoes. I guess she was chastising him for his shoelaces or whatever. And he stops right there. Well, she did the right thing and said, oh, you can't stop here. People are trying to get out of the store. So that was good. But I just thought, you're still falling short, lady. I wanted to say to her, put on shoes. Put on shoes in the supermarket. It just annoyed me. I don't know. Maybe it's an old man thing. But, teaching kids is tough. And even though I think that mother kind of fell short in that particular instance, she'd probably be better off teaching her son, math and reading and writing and all the stuff he would learn in school than having the school do it at this point, because the schools are heading down a dark path. I just saw a Twitter post, and I don't know how real it is, but supposedly it's a teacher, I believe in Arizona, boxing up copies of Lord of the Flies. And then there's a second picture where the lids are shut and written on top is the words garbage. And she's kind of bragging to everyone on Twitter how she's getting rid of those books for more important books. It's like, what the hell are you doing, lady? You're basically bragging about how you're destroying or removing a classic of literature from a school like you knew better. Like you know better than people from decades and decades of reading Lord of the Flies, a classic story that everybody reads in high school. What is wrong with you, lady? What is seriously wrong with you? And to call it garbage, it's one thing to say, well, I think, we could deliver a message similar and with a different book that maybe has more appeal or whatever. It's another thing to call a classic book garbage. I mean, that is pretty friggin' high and mighty, if you ask me. And I hope that woman is fired if she works in a public school. But this kind of stuff happens all the time, unfortunately. You have, there was another post bragging about the 1619 project being taught in schools. Do not teach that in schools. Do not teach critical race theory either. In my view, they're racist and they're only going to cause more racism. It's one thing to put that stuff out in the ether at all. People have freedom of speech, so whatever. But it's another thing to present it as to a child as valid, because the teacher is an authority figure that the child trusts. The academics, quote unquote, who've presented this nonsense, they're also, in my view, breaking the trust because what they're presenting is nonsense and only going to cause more problems. But what are you going to do? Nobody ever listens to me. Schools, public schools, I think, should be turned into private institutions. They would pay the teachers better. The students would learn differently. They could think outside the box, and hopefully they would get a better education, or at least one that wasn't terrible. Maybe it wouldn't be all that great, but it wouldn't be that. It wouldn't be coddled human beings. And these teachers, in my view, have been coddled. They are the kids from years past that weren't corrected. They weren't taught to take responsibility. They weren't taught, that normal things, if that makes any sense. Like, if you have a situation in which you're teaching, no, everybody's equal no matter what, that's first off, it's not true. Some people are just stronger, faster, smarter. Some people will deceive you. The way the system ran before was you kind of gave people the tools which to live, and then they would, even in school, encounter people that might challenge them in some way. The challenges are all being removed because nobody wants any risk in the school, because the risk becomes, well, I've been triggered, or I don't feel good about that. I don't feel good about the challenge. So mommy, please remove the challenge so I don't feel bad about myself. And women fall into this trap, I think, more so women than men. Although I would say some men do this too. They remove that challenge, and then the kid becomes enabled. He or she becomes, well, I expect those challenges to be removed for me. And schools were even like that in my day. Some teachers were just, they were too copacetic with the student body. I had a teacher, she was a biology teacher. This was in high school, and she had never taught anyone over the age of, I'll say 9. And she had, for whatever reason, moved up to high school, and she was teaching biology. But she attempted to teach us like we were 9. And the class ran roughshod over her. I felt bad for her. I tried to help her, but she refused to. She indulged every student in that room in every possible way. And we had a guy in that room who, I think he had failed out and he was already 18, but he was in he was still in like the junior class. And for some reason he had to come back to school to like try to pass high school. And he was just a terror, right? So one time we got put in the biology room that was for the honor students. And I was an honor student, but I wasn't in honors biology for some reason. I forget why. But they had the jars full of various animal fetuses, and he started opening them up. And I mean, he just ran amok in the class. We had to. Then it turned out we were in the wrong class. It smelled like formaldehyde the moment he started opening these things up and dumping them out. Then we had to go to another class because we were in the wrong classroom. So we got up to leave, and he got the fire extinguisher in the hallway and just sprayed the hall. I mean, he was a maniac. He didn't get into trouble because she refused to believe that any kind of discipline was good. She was that accommodating to him. That was the word I was looking for, accommodating. She was so accommodating and so nurturing to the point of ridiculousness. I mean, this guy literally could have just stolen her purse and car, and she probably would have went, well, you know, you really should return that, but okay. I mean, that's the way she was. She was just a doormat, and she needed to draw a line in the sand, and she could not do it. She was completely incapable. And this is in the 80s. Now we have teachers more and more like that. They're so willing to accommodate students. When I was substituting and this was a few years ago, but I substituted and I couldn't correct the students because they would get mad, and I would tell them, please sit down and shut up. And I wasn't rude about it. Understand that you always start, polite, and then you sort of ramp up as the students do not listen to you. And I get it. You're a substitute teacher. They're not going to listen to you. But, at some point you have to draw the line. And these kids were used to going to the bathroom whenever they want and getting snacks whenever they want. And they abuse that privilege insanely much, in my view. And so they just didn't do their work. And I would get blasted for not making them do their work. So I was encouraged to do something to get them to do their work, but there was nothing I could do. And because I couldn't discipline them, and the school would chastise me if I tried, I had no authority over them. So they just would do whatever the hell they wanted. And when I tried to discipline one particular kid who was unruly, I got blasted and let go. So, and really all I did was tell him to sit down and shut up. But, you can't do that. I once called a kid a knucklehead in a high school class. I mean, this kid was like 17 or 18. I called him a knucklehead. Just, oh, don't be a knucklehead kind of thing. Not like I was yelling at him. I was just like sort of casually, oh, don't be a knucklehead. Let's try to do this work, whatever. He was a big problem. I sent him down to the office, and then later I went down to talk to the vice principal about him, and his criticism was for me. And by the way, don't call people knuckleheads. Like, knucklehead is like the most gentle thing you could call a kid. Like, oh, you can't do that. You can't even do that. So what we're producing is just droves and droves of these entitled, spoiled, unknowledgeable sheep who think they're owed everything, but don't know anything and don't understand how the world works. And what do you think happens to these people? Well, they go out and they still feel that way. They don't change. They've been getting entitled for their entire lives. So when they come into a store, what do you think they expect? Do they expect that they have to walk around and pick things out? No, it's like, well, where is the stuff on this aisle? It's that guy, right? Like this, well, shouldn't it be over here? I mean, I'm over here. When you got a guy complaining about like where the food is in the supermarket. This is another dysfunctional human who got a bad education, probably comes from a dysfunctional family. And that's another thing that is really a problem. You know, it was even in my time in school, they always taught to the dumbest kid in the room, which to some extent you understand, but at least there was a line that the teachers kind of did cross. Some of them did, but most didn't. Now, like, that's gone completely out of the window. It's policy to not only teach to the dumbest kid in the room, but the most dysfunctional kid. So I was substituting for a class, and the kid was, and I told this story before, but it just amazes me. This kid was so angry, he scared me. And he was like maybe 4th or 5th grade. And he had his hand in the desk, and he had a pen, and he was just going up and down, and he was so mad. And here, he was mad because somebody in the class said his real name. And he didn't like to be called by that. He liked to be called by a variant of his name. I forget what it was. And he just got furious. And I thought he was going to stab a kid with this pencil, or me. I really did. And so I pulled another teacher aside who was in the room teaching kids how to read all the way in the corner. And they were watching a film, and I'm like, this kid's very angry. He's messed up. I think we should do something. And she said, oh, yeah, that's so-and-so, and he's that way, and the doctors say he should be with normal kids. And I'm like, but if he snaps and stabs one of these kids, where are we going to be then? Like, she didn't care about that. She was just too busy nurturing him. And everybody in the room had to deal with him. And he was dysfunctional in some way. I don't know if he had a mental problem or what. And sure, the doctor may say it was best for him to be in the room with all those regular kids who didn't have these anger control problems. But was it good for the rest of the kids? I mean, I was scared for them. Would it have been good for them if he did finally snap and stab one of them? And the rest of the kids saw it and saw the blood and were traumatized? No. This kid had a real problem. And while I sympathize with his problem, he should have been isolated, in my view, from the rest of the students. And so his problem could be addressed. Not thrown into the wolf's den. Well, he'll get better. But that's the way the schools are now. They've lowered all the standards so everybody could just come in and out as quickly as possible. It's a babysitting service. You're not getting any education. If you privatize the system, it would provide competition, and the good students would end up going to better schools in a merit-based system, and the students who were dysfunctional would probably end up in other schools. And if it was profit-based, you could have a system under which, well, you know, these other students who cost so much more money because they're dysfunctional, once they're separated, you could provide tax breaks for a corporation, let's say, that owns 5 or 6 schools, and maybe 5 of them are for regular kids, and then they have 1 school for all the problem kids, and that becomes the major tax write-off for the other 5 schools. And that could be a system that works, but nobody's interested in that system. Now they're trying to push critical race theory on these same kids, and that's just going to make racist out of some of them. And some of them are already mentally ill. So how's that going to work? Not well. So we really need to work on education. If Trump pulls off the miracle that everybody who supports him hopes he pulls off, I think that's the first priority. And if not, then we should be looking at taking over our local school boards and schools and trying to root out this woke nonsense that's not going to help the students, and maybe trying to get the schools back on track to something that would at least resemble an education.